Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining. My name is Caleb, and I work on the iModel.js team. Today, we'll be talking about how to build an iModel.js extension for the iTwin viewer to fully unlock the extensibility and capabilities of the iModel.js and iTwin ecosystem. To get started, I'll give a quick intro of the iTwin viewer. The iTwin viewer is a configurable iModel.js viewer. It sets a lot of the defaults and some of the basic tools that are the most popular ones and some of the recommendations that we have from the iModel.js team. And then on top of that, it can be fully extended through iModel.js extensions, through using our full APIs, and also by using our UI framework and extending the visual capabilities of it. So I'm going to get started, and the easiest way to get started with the iTwin viewer is actually a create React app template that we've created. I'm going to go ahead and get this started since it takes a minute or so to run through it and get it set up. And then we'll get going. For iModel.js and the iTwin viewer, we've chosen to base it on create React app is the recommended way. Since the iModel.js UI packages and iTwin viewer use React, that seemed like the easiest place to get started. It's very popular for all React applications. If you want to learn more about Create React App itself, they have a great documentation page at createreactapp.dev, so you can check that out there. Now, just to give a quick overview of what's going on here on the screen. So Create React App has a command line generator that allows you to generate a new project. So I just am calling create React app with my app name, and that's going to be the name of the app that I am creating. It's going to set that all up for me. And then the second argument here is the iTwin viewer. So we have defined an iTwin viewer template, and that's what you're actually seeing on my screen in the GitHub window. And that provides all the defaults, and we'll kind of walk through what it has as well once this fully installs and we open it up and start looking around in the code. Scroll back up here. The last bit here is the scripts version. We have a fork of the React scripts that are in Create React App to set a few of the defaults that make it easier to write an iModel.js application built on Create React App. It's a few modifications for icons and CSS and things like that. And it also is needed to provide the extension functionality. So that fork is publicly available on iModel.js GitHub organization, so you can go check that out to see the list of things that we have actually changed. And then the last line there is I prefer to use NPM over Yarn, but that is personal preference, so you can leave that off if you want to. And now it looks like it has finished here. So the first thing we're going to do, now that everything's installed, we're going to take a look at our screen here, and we do have a my app name folder, and we're just going to open that up in Visual Studio Code. All right, and now that we're in here, I'll give you a quick this setup. So we have our package.json that it has created for us with all of the iModel.js dependencies that are required to get going. It has our build and start scripts and a handful of other ESLint and browser list for Webpack and things like that. Since it's TypeScript, since iModel.js is all TypeScript based, it has created the TypeScript TS config JSON file for us. And to really get going, we're going to go ahead and drop into this .env file. This defines a handful of things, including the auth client and the actual iModel and project IDs. Now, I created a iModel and project beforehand with from the iModel.js getting started dashboard where it has the iModel registration, just to save a bit of time. So I am going to copy over my context and iModel ID so we can get started. Now with those in there, I'm going to open up a integrated terminal within VS Code to not have to switch so much back and forth between VS Code and everywhere else. So to get started, once we have our iModel and context ID in, what we're going to do is just do npm start. And this will take a few minutes. It's going to compile and start our development server. I am going to move this out of the way here while I do that. And so let's take a walk through while this is getting started. So the first thing you'll notice is you have in index.tsx. This is the beginning of any Create React application. And if we go into this app component here, this is what really defines the meat of this, the iTwin viewer. So there's two main portions to the template. Two things you need to do. The first one is setting up authorization. So this sets up all the authorization to initialize an OIDC client. This one in particular is setting up the using the iModel.js provided front-end authorization client, and it grabs all of those environment variables for you out of that .env file that we saw earlier and gets that all set up. So that this works correct right out of the box with the .env file that's there. And then the second thing that really is set up for you when you run this template is this viewer component. And this is the iTwin viewer. It's provided as a React component and expects a few different props to be defined for it. But other than that, it's you drop it in and you provide the props, and it will give you the full viewport that you're looking for. And we'll take a look in 1 second once that finishes up. Now, if you look at the props here, we're just going to have context ID, iModel ID, and then it's providing that authorization client that was created for you here. All right, so now we are good to go. And let's pull over Chrome here, and I will open up our localhost. All right, and the first thing we see here is our sign in. So I am just going to walk through and sign in. All right, now once we're signed in, we will start loading our iModel. So this iModel I created is one of the samples that is on available for anybody to create. This is the stadium. You probably have all seen it in previous demos, and we're going to be using this today with our demo. And if you look here, this is the basics of what the iTwin viewer provides right out of the box. It provides a selection tools, a couple measure tools here, as well as a set of sectioning tools. And then if we come over here to the view navigation, we have the fit to view and some of our other the rotate and pan tools that make it really easy to move around. We also have the walk tool and the camera, and then we have our model, our tree, and then we also have the property grid as well. So with that, that's kind of the quick overview of the iTwin viewer. So now let's switch back and start getting ourselves set up for an extension. All right, so I'm going to come back to my VS Code window here, and I am actually going to click this little split icon that lets you create a new terminal right in line here. I'm just going to give a quick overview of extensions before we get started. An extension is a separate JavaScript bundle that is actually web-packed and can be loaded into an iModel.js application like the iTwin viewer at runtime. So this allows you to fully extend any iModel.js app or the iTwin viewer with several different capabilities. And this is done through a loading mechanism, and it allows you to have the full capabilities of iModel.js. So you can have full access to the iModel.js front-end APIs that are available, and that's through something we call shared libraries. And these shared libraries are loaded in so that both the application and the extension can share the same instances of those shared components. So something like, if you're familiar with iModel.js, have something like iModel app can be used and imported the same way in the extension as you normally would use it within the application. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. What I'm going to do is just go up a level here and create a new folder called My Extension. And then I am actually going to use VS Code's workspace functionality, and I am going to add the My Extension folder into my workspace here, just so I can see both of them at the same time and work on them both in parallel. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to get started. We're going to run npm init -yes just to start up a new application. And then the next step is going to be let's add in some of the iModel.js dependencies that we need to get started with our extension. A handful of these are just the standard ones needed by iModel.js front end. In addition, we have build tools and this extension Webpack tools, which I'll go into in a few minutes. And for those of you that want to follow along, in the links provided in the resources section, there is a walkthrough that has the full getting started for extensions. And I am just going to walk through that and kind of talk through it as we go, and to kind of give you a context of where that is. And if you want to just follow along directly, there is a GitHub repository with the output that comes out of running through all these steps. Now, since we're going to be building the TypeScript, the extension with TypeScript, we're going to create a tsconfig file, and I have the tsconfig output saved over here, so I'm just going to drop that in, and this is just including a certain set of files and where to output them to. Now, to continue on, now we need to add the steps to actually build the extension. There are two scripts we added to our package.json. The first one is just creating the TypeScript. So it just compiles the TypeScript directly into the lib folder like we just defined in the tsconfig. The second part is building the extension using our Webpack tools. Now, these are a custom set of Webpack tools that allow us to interact with the host app. You know how I was talking about the shared libraries that we use? This extension Webpack tools knows about those shared libraries and can correctly set up the Webpack configuration and the resulting bundle so that it works once it's loaded into that host application. And to get started then with our app, I am going to create a myextension.ts file. And the first thing to do whenever you're starting an extension is to create a subclass of extension. And the extension class is defined in the iModel.js frontend package. So you will just need to import the extension from iModel.js frontend. And this would be easier if I had it installed first. So let me go ahead and do that now. And as I walk through this, so what we've done here is defined the My Extension, which requires a couple methods to be defined by default. The first one is the onload method. Now, this is needed to initially start your extension. This method is called once the extension has been downloaded and has been executed for the first time. So we do things in here like set up namespaces so that you're all set to go once you start actually doing something. And what just for this demo, what we're going to do as well is we're going to call a just throw up an alert on the screen as soon as this onload finishes. Now, the second method that you need to define is the onExecute method. Now, this method is needed anytime the extension is invoked more than once. So, and so it is called directly after the onLoad method on that first load, and it's called every single other time this extension is executed. And really how you would do that is using the extension admin off of iModel.js app, which I'm about to add here. You can call a method called load from iModel app, and that would call this on execute every single time you call that method. So if you have something that you repeatedly want to do, you can call iModel app extension admin.load extension and load that same extension over and over. So here I am going to do an iModel app, import the iModel app. And the last necessary piece for any extension is this registration. Like I was saying about the extension admin on iModel app, I'm just going to, you need to register your extension with the iModel app itself so it knows to call that onLoad and onExecute method once it's ready to go. So what we do is we create a new My extension and pass in the name of the extension. Now, pay attention to the name of this extension is very important for a couple reasons, and you'll see in a few minutes once we get started trying to load this extension into our app. So now that we're here, let's go ahead and do one last thing before we get started actually trying to build this. We're going to set up a localization file just so these translate functions actually work when we go to view it. So I'm going to create my public locales English folder, and what I'm going to do then is create a sample.json, which will hold all of the localization strings. And here we go. This will be those strings. And then the last thing we need to do for the localization is just add a pre-build script that will copy those localization files to the correct output. All right. All right, and now what we want to do is let's go ahead and build it. Let's go npm run build. What it does is it will compile the TypeScript, and then you will also get the output of the extension. And you see it's copied our locales in there already. And now if we open it back up, it also has this index.js file, which, as you can see, is our Webpack bundle of the extension. So this is all you need to do to get the initial extension all set up to run. And what we're going to do next is we're actually going to move on and try to load this into the application. Now, there are two main ways to load extensions into your application and to really publish them so that they're available for your application to call. One of the ways is to load it from the web root of your application. And so that would be whatever address you have that at, or on localhost, you can host that and the application can pull directly from that. You could set up a local server that serves out your extension. So you could set it up to localhost 3003 so it doesn't conflict with your main app, and then you could serve the extension out of there. And then one of the last ones, those two are very similar, but the last one is the Bentley extension service. We provide a extension service that allows organization-specific extensions. So if you're looking to create an extension for your application and potentially want to share it with your organization, or if you want to publish it and potentially load it into some of Bentley's applications, we've created an extension service that will let you do that. I'm not going to go over the extension service today in the sake of time, but we will hopefully in the next couple weeks be releasing something on the iModel.js YouTube channel with some more information on how you can go about publishing your extension and then loading that published extension into the iTwin viewer from there. So the one I'm going to follow through here is to just host it from the web root of the my app name that we have here. I find that the easiest one, but you can do it a variety of different ways to load those in. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to actually create a folder in the my app name under build, and then iModel.js extensions is the subpath that we're going to be looking at here. And then the next one is sample is the next part of that path there. And remember how I told you that the name of your extension would be important? This is the part where that comes in. So for any path that you have localhost, this can be very important, that name, because that's going to be what is required to pull your extension, and that's how it would be stored in the extension service as well. So this name is very important, and it's how you will actually load that extension into the application. I do not have those other paths. Give me 1 second here. All right, now we're all set to go. All right, so now if you see, I have this build directory, and this is something that Create React App does. They actually serve files out of the build directory, as well as the ones that they've started on this dev server. So this is kind of the Create React App dev server here that's handling all of this for us. So I'm going to go ahead and take advantage of that during this demo. All right, and now to get the extension into that build folder, we're just going to copy it directly over. And once we copy it over, that is now all set up. Now there's one more thing we need to change from the iTwin viewer side in order to add this extension into it. And so we're going to come back over to our app.tsx. And what we're going to do is we're going to add a list of extensions that we want to load. So this list here that I've added is defines a viewer extension is called in the iTwin viewer. And that just is the name of the extension that you want to load, that same name that we used in that path and in the construction of our extension itself, and then just providing that URL. So this is the URL of our app, and so we're going to just add that in there. We are missing an import, so I'm just going to import that quickly. It is from this, so I will do that here. And that's in there. All right, and then now that we've created this extensions object, we just need to pass it into the viewer so the viewer knows to load those in. And the viewer has a set of props that you can just add in the extensions to and be all set to go. Now with Create React App, it is doing hot reloading, so anytime I change files, it's already there. So now if I go back over to our application, I should see our extension. So I'm going to reload the page here, and we should see the extension being loaded. All right, what went wrong here? Let's see. Do you know what I did? I changed what I told you all that you should not do, that you should pay attention to. This name sample is samples in this example there. So that should be ready to go. And now that it is reloaded with the correct name, here we get that alert that we had set up within our extension. And then right after that, it's calling that onExecute method. And now we're back in here. So at this point, let's recap a little bit. We have set up the iTwin viewer using the Create React App template. and then set up that iTwin viewer to load a particular project in iModel within the application. Then we went over and walked through the getting started tutorial of extensions and really went through the process of what it takes to make an extension. And then we added that extension and published it into the current localhost web root in order to publish that extension and actually load it into the iTwin viewer. So that's gone over a lot, and we now have a running extension within our app. But let's go a step further and add some UI into the iTwin viewer and see if we can get it to do more than just add an alert into the page. So to get started, let's head back over to our extension and go a little bit further with what we're doing here. So the first thing I'm going to do to get started is actually comment out these alerts. It's to avoid them keep popping up once we get started here. So a new concept that's been added to iModel.js in order to support extensions is a UI items manager. And this class actually is in charge of holding on to and managing all of the UI items within the application that can be used through extensions. There are many parts that you can control through here, so you can add toolbars, you can add widgets, you can add full panels or front stages to this. And that really allows you a lot of flexibility in what you can do with extensions and adding on top of the app UI of the iTwin viewer. So I am just going to import the UI items manager from UI abstract here. And UI abstract is a separate package that we have that really defines some of these more abstract UI concepts and is a dependency of iModel.js front end. So all iModel.js applications that have iModel app are using the UI abstract and have that UI manager that you can use. So the next part here that you see is I am actually registering a my UI items provider. And we'll talk about through this, but the main purpose of the UI items manager is really to hold a list of all of the UI items that are in there, and then also to update the UI as new things are added. So once I register a new provider with the UI manager, that really is what lets us add that functionality in. And let's go ahead and get that set up, and then we can talk through actually how it gets in there. So I am going to set up a base set here, and we are going to also import UI items provider as well as iTwin. And this is from Bentley iTwin package. Yeah, there we go. So now we're good to go. And so to define your own items provider, you just derive directly from the UI items provider that's in UI abstract. This doesn't have too many required fields. I mean, the only main one is this ID, which is going to be read-only for this instance. And then here I'm just passing in the iTwin instance just so you have full reuse of it. And then the next part that really provides the items that you're going to be adding to the UI is a set of methods that are abstract in UI items provider and let you define what you want to return once the UI manager asks this provider what it should have, what it wants to add. So we're going to add a method here. We're going to override the provide toolbar items method. And this toolbar items actually return a set of toolbar items that should be added to the application. And we'll go over what the rest of these parameters mean in a minute, but let me go ahead and paste in a line of code here. So this if statement here defines what you can do with when manipulating the UI. So we're going to start from right to left. I think it's easier to understand that way. So the toolbar orientation, there's really two of those. There's the vertical and horizontal, and this lets you determine when this method is called. The UI manager will send in the string that it's trying to populate. So it iterates through each of the toolbars within the application and sends in which orientation that specific toolbar is. So in this case, we only want to add buttons into the toolbar if it's vertical orientation. So if it's not, we're just going to return empty, and this provider is going to return anything. And then the next one here is toolbar usage. Now there are also two of these. There's content manipulation, which are a lot of the tools that you saw, such as sectioning and clipping tools, the measure tools as well, and the selection tool. So we want to add ours into that one. The other type of toolbar usage is view manipulation. So that would be your rotate tool, the pan tool, and zoom and things like that. Go over in that section normally. So we want to put ours over with the sectioning tool and other items. And then I'm not going to go into too much detail about the stage usage, but there is a general stage usage, and I'm just going to make sure that anytime there's this general stage, front stage loaded, we load into that one. So just to recap, we want to load into a toolbar that is vertical in the content manipulation area in the UI, and then within any stage in the application. So a few different things to filter out to make sure we're not adding too much to this, because if we didn't define one of these toolbars, we may end up going into all the toolbars. So if we go back over to the UI here, you have 1, 2, 3 toolbars defined. So if we didn't define which one we want, the item would end up in every single one of these, which is normally what you don't want. But you could do if it was your intention. So next here, I am going to import a handful of these items before we get moving further. So let's go and add several of these. All of these concepts are in UI abstract, so we can just add all these in. All right, so now that we've defined this and defined our initial conditions for actually adding our buttons, let's go ahead and define those buttons that we want to add. So I'm going to drop in a fairly large return statement here. So this return statement is defining an array of buttons. So we're using the toolbar item utilities that actually comes out of the that comes UI abstract package as well. So we're going to paste that in there. And then let's go through here and kind of walk through what's going on. So this create action button has a number of different things that you need to pass into it in order to define a new button. You need a specific ID for yours. Normally, it's good practice to append your extension name to that. So here I've appended my extension. You could also append the ID of your provider directly to this as well. That might be a good thing to do. And then I am going to add in the markup selection tool. So the first thing we're going to do, we're just going to append that on there so that we know this is our selection tool that we're adding. Next thing that's there is the priority. And this really determines the order in which the items show up in the toolbar. So changing the priority will change which order your button shows up in compared to what the base app has. Or, if you have multiple extensions, you could layer them on top of each other, and they could be in all sorts of different orders there. And then the next one is just defining the icon for this. And this is just going to use the icon cursor, just like the selection tool. We're going to use that. And then on the tool class itself, it has the flyover, which is the description, the little text you hover over the tool. Now to get rid of some of these squigglies here, we're going to import directly from the iModel.js markup package, which defines which defines all of these tools and all of the setup needed for the markup itself. So we're just going to import this package, and we're going to pull these tools directly in and just wrap them within action buttons that we're adding to this toolbar. And then next up here, the first thing you need to do before running markup is you need to run markup start, and that will start the markup stage and set up your view so that you can start drawing on that canvas. And I have one more import here from iModel.js frontend, and we're going to do that. That will get rid of the rest of our install issues. And then as we go down these buttons, I'm going to define 3 buttons. One is the selection tool for markup, and we'll see what these do. And you can definitely read more about them. These are on the iModel.js documentation site, and there's plenty of docs about both the selection tool, markup app, and the line tool documentation. So if I might skip over some things here that you might have questions about, feel free to jump over there. So the next one I'm going to define is the line tool. This just lets you draw a markup as a line, and I'll show both of these. And then the last one is just to stop the markup in general. This just checks if it's active and then stops it if it is. And this will let you go back to your default state. Now, that's pretty much all it is. We're just creating these action buttons from the toolbar item utilities, and this just makes it easy to create these different tool buttons. And we're just returning them from this provide toolbar button items. And this is really how the UI items manager works. It iterates through all of the items providers and calls each of these methods, and it aggregates all of the returns of those and then orders them correctly and then actually renders them onto into the app, and it allows you to really be extensible at runtime or on certain conditions when you're building up your app. So it's doesn't need to be predefined, and it's kind of a runtime decision of what shows into your application. And it really unlocks the full power of what we can do with extensions. So next up, before we build this, let's go and add one package that is missing from our package.json, as it was telling us here. We're gonna copy the quantity here and drop it markup. We are going to do another npm install to get that markup in there. And then we're going to build this and load it up into our application and see how it all works. All right, so we're going to run a build here. And once this builds, we're going to copy it over, back over to the sample app. And now that we're over there, it should just reload, and we can see it's reloading here. And what did I do wrong? The one thing I did miss was I missed setting up the markup localization. So markup app actually defines an initialize method, which sets up the localization that's required for all of the markup tools. So with that in mind and that added back in there, what we're going to do is just rebuild this and then copy that over again. All right, now that we copied it back over, let's go to here. And now we can see from the base viewer, we can look at this toolbar on the left here, and we have 3 additional buttons that we've added. And I am going to fit to view here and then zoom in on the stadium model. And we're going to draw some lines here and go into the markup session. And now when we click the markup, you see how the little bar around here, that is the startup. And now we are going to click on the line tool, and then we can just start drawing these lines for markup. We can go click on the selection tool and select and change the size of that markup. We can go ahead and draw some more lines on here. And just continue on. There's a handful of other markup tools, but I chose those two just for their ease of use there. But this is really what extensions are all about. They really let you take the default app of the iTwin viewer and then add tool items. And we didn't show widgets today, but you could add something over here to your property panel or up in this area as well. There are many capabilities that are available. You're able to do with extensions in the iTwin viewer and to really extend all of that functionality. So with that, I am going to close out of this session here, and you see we closed out of our full markup session. And that's about it for the demos today. Thank you all for listening. And if you are interested in extensions, learning more about that, or the iTwin viewer, feel free to check out our documentation page. There are many links in the resources tab there that point you to both of those. And also there is a link in there that has the full source code for this demo. So it will include both the application and the extension that are built here, along with a README that kind of walks you through the steps that I've went through here. And again, thank you all for listening.